I had one of those almost picture perfect childhoods in the early days. Grandfather's Waylon Jennings. My mother is his stepdaughter, but he raised her, right? I get so mad when these people say in print his step grandpa, like that was Pawpaw.
Come on.
You know what I mean? Like whatever, you can say what you want. That was Pawpaw. That man raised me.
Yeah.
But my dad was killed when I was 10. So the first 10 years of my life, you know, we lived in Franklin with my mom because my mom and dad split up when I was young. And I would go to West Nashville on the weekends and see my dad. My mom toured a lot because she was singing backup for my grandfather. So I didn't, you know, I had a lot of freedom as a kid and, you know, riding my bike around my neighborhood and my dad hung the moon. Like I thought he was the coolest, toughest guy in the world. You know, he rode around in old school cars with a trucker hat, old West Nashville boy, you know, called him Fat Pete. You know, he was like the king out there. And so the first 10 years seemed pretty smooth and most that I can, you know, recollect. And then he got murdered when I was 10, which back then they told me was suicide. And he had called me that day and I was outside playing football and I told my mom, I'll call him back, I'm outside playing football. So I come in the house that night, I hear my mom back in the room crying. I was sitting down watching Roseanne and all of a sudden cars start pulling in the driveway and Waylon comes in. They all sit me down. They're like, your dad's no longer with us. So my mom kind of, I'm not gonna say tailspins because, you know, she held her stuff together, but my mom was 16 when she had me. So she was a baby raising a baby. She was just kind of figuring it out herself. Amazing woman, and, you know, but she was learning the same way I was. We kind of raised each other, right?
Doing the best you can with what you taught. Yeah.
But she was singing backup for Waylon for a while. And then my dad got killed. She had gotten into a pretty abusive relationship, remarried to a guy who's a bodybuilder. And, you know, I watched him put his hands on her quite a bit. And, but she did good of shielding me from that, you know, but I still saw it. And, definitely something that I've dealt with throughout my life. As far as one of the last things I remember my dad telling me is that it is your job as a man to always protect and support the women in your life and women and children in general, right? But and watching her get her ass beat, I've got 3 assault records, charges on my record, and they're all from seeing some guy kicking this girl's ass, and I intervened. But so my dad dies, my mom divorces the douchebag that's been beating her up. And then she jumps into another relationship. My grandfather didn't really like it. You know, he's like, hey, you need to chill out. Like, you need to focus on your career and your son. And so they kind of had it out. And so we moved out of the house that he had bought for her and moved to Hermitage. And they threw me in DuPont Tyler. Right. Which was like total culture shock, right? And so I was there for a couple of years. Ended up getting kicked out in the 8th grade for having a gun. Started getting into gangs.
That's 3 years after your dad passed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really about 2. Within 2 years, I was already had joined a gang, or you know, it was a gangster disciple, and was running around with a pistol, and you know, 12, 13 years old.
And not to cut you off, but I want to. So that 2 years. I mean, you're 10 years old. Your hero, you were told, shot himself.
Yeah. Not in my living with the regret of had I answered the phone that day, he had not killed himself.
How long did that play through your head?
Until I was 18.
Okay.
And then my uncle told me that he didn't kill himself.
Oh.
He had been shot. It was a chapter of closure, right?
Yeah.
But I asked my uncle, like, why did everybody let me live with that regret?
Yeah, man.
And he was like, I would rather you live with regret than revenge. that kind of closed that chapter. That was like a little bit of closure, right? Because I dealt with it all through my teens, threatening suicide,
all the
right?
anger. I mean, just,
All that anger, that resentment, or that regret, really.
Yeah.
The anger and resentment of why would he leave me?
Yeah.
You know, why was I not good enough that he offed himself, you know? And I was suicidal my whole life because of it, right? Like I always played with that when I was a teenager. And anytime I'd get in trouble or whatever, I'd put a gun to my head or, you know, say I was going to do something. I'd like cut my wrist when I was young a couple times. You know, definitely struggled with that throughout my early teen years. It wasn't actually until a year and a half, 2 years ago that I found out who killed him, which is a crazy story. Should we go to that now?
Oh, yeah,
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just recently, about a year and a half ago, I'd say, maybe 2 years ago, that they called me and told me that my aunt was on her deathbed and she wasn't going to probably make it through the night. Favorite aunt, right? And I go over there and I see her and she's still so full of life. I'm like, what are you doing, baby? She's like, I'm just waiting on them to open up the door so I can see what's on the other side, you know? And they're like, you sure are eating a lot. And she's like, hell, baby, it's the Last Supper. You know, she was just still full of life, but I got my arm around her and a bunch of family in the room. And one of my uncles calls and my aunt's got him on speakerphone. My other aunt's got him on speakerphone. He's like trying to tell me something. I'm talking to him. I can tell he's crying and he's upset. I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. He's like, oh, your aunt's the one that killed your daddy. And I've got my arm around her. Right.
Oh my God.
But it was such a testament to who I am because I didn't feel any different about her. You know, it was 32 years ago, right? My entire life, she was my rock. She was one of my favorite aunt. She always had my back. She would hide me from the police. She'd give me $50 if I needed it. She'd, you know, come through and help with a light bill when I was a single father struggling in my late teens. Like she always had my back. And whatever happened that night happened. And I wish I could have got that closure, right? And just maybe know, but maybe it's not for me to know. But it was definitely another chapter,
Yeah.
you know, of getting that closure and saying, okay, well, now at least I'm not wondering.
Sure.
And I don't feel revenge.
Yeah.
Now, I don't feel regret because there's nothing I could have done. I don't feel resentment towards him, and I didn't feel any resentment towards her.
Yeah.
You know, because shit happens, right? My family had covered it up, and I commend them for that, right? Like they had kept that truth together because they didn't want to, you know, whether it was an accident or, you know, they just got into it and, you know, it happened. It happened, and they didn't want to lose.
Complete control.
Yeah, they didn't want to lose their sister too. Like, you know, we just lost him, you know, to death. We don't want to lose her to prison, you know. So there was something that they swept under the rug and they kept, and shows me a lot about them.